What's up, guys? Thanks for tuning into another AntTech Airsoft video. I'm going to try my very best to give the most brief and not overly detailed explanation, and I guess a little walkthrough on basic HPA stuff. This is targeted towards my clients that I had built an HPA replica for, of who have never dealt with HPA before. So this might apply to you, but I'm going to keep things in the context of I built you the replica and you're using the brand new tank and regulator that I recommended you get. So let's get started. First question is going to be, what kind of engine do you have? Did I do a Kythera build or did I do like an F2 build? The main difference is a mechanical or an electro-pneumatic engine. A mechanical engine is just all mechanical. So there's no electronics, there's no battery needed. Electro-pneumatic, there's going to be some brains in there that will be telling your engine what to do, when to do it, and how to do it, and that will need a battery to power it. 7.4 volt LiPo. You do not use an 11.1 on your HPA engines. I have not seen a single one that is rated for an 11.1. 7.4. You can use the tiny little JST LiPos that you can find on any Airsoft retail store. And for beginners, I'll just leave that at that. Let's talk about tanks. You have two regulators at all times. And what I mean by that is you have your tank, which has a built-in bottle regulator. I'll call it the bottle regulator. Airsoft stores, they're going to call this guy the regulator, and they're going to call this guy the regulator. They're both regulators. They're just regulating different things for different reasons. Bottle regulator, and regulator. Bottles come in different shapes, sizes, and materials. The main thing you need to know as a new guy getting into HPA is how much pressure can this tank hold before it explodes? And I guess, what is the cubic inch? What is the volume inside? How much air can it hold? So there's two tanks here. This one's rated for 4,500 PSI. This one's rated for 3,000 PSI. If I fill this to 4,500 PSI, the blowout valves will go, and they better, because if they don't, this thing could be a shrapnel grenade. And you don't want that. You don't want that at all. If I had this tank and another one right next to it, and they were both the same exact size, but this one was 4,500 PSI, and this one was 3,000 PSI, I'm going to get more shots on the 4,500 PSI one. While this tank and the imaginary clone next to it is the same cubic inches, has the same volume, I can cram more air into this guy. Let's talk about the cubic inches. We have 90 cubic inch and we have 9 cubic inch. If these were both 4,500 PSI, this will obviously hold more than this guy because I can fit more air into it. What size tank you end up going with will be kind of unique to your use case. If we're doing a gas stock, I like to get the tiniest little tanks I can get. If I'm doing an LMG build, I like to get one of these big guys or two of these big guys, and I connect them with a dual source kit, and I'll talk about the dual source kit in a little bit. Let's talk about our bottle regulator. This thing does regulate, but it's not adjustable. It's a fixed output. So this thing can fill up to 4,500 PSI. So as you use the tank and as it drains, this pressure can be anything that's between 4,500 and 0. This bottle regulator is taking all of that pressure and it's reducing it down to a bite-size output that this regulator can handle. Some features of the bottle regulator will be the valve where it'll get filled from. If you're new to HPA, my suggestion is when it comes to filling these, just take it to the local airsoft field, airsoft shop, or paintball store. Have them fill your tanks for you. Another feature is going to be this dial. The dial on the bottle regulator is just telling you how much air you have left in the tank. And it tells you that with pressure. So if it's a 4,500 PSI tank, when it's full, this dial should be in between the 4 and the 5 tick mark. We have 0 through 6. They're 1,000 PSI increments. 4,500, again, should be right in between the 4 and the 5. As I shoot it and it empties, I'll see this dial go down. And once I start hitting that 1,000 and less PSI point, that's when we'll start to see a dip in performance and muzzle velocity because we're just running out of air. There's also these two little hex head things that are on the bottle regulator. Do not mess with these. These are blowout valves. These are meant to blow out in the event that you put more pressure in here than this thing can handle. The reason why it'll blow out is so that it doesn't blow up, because your life has meaning, and Ninja does not want to get sued. Let's talk about our regulator. So it's not the bottle regulator. This is going to be what you actually screw your tank into. The purpose of these regulators is to take the fixed output from your bottle regulator, and it's going to allow you to reduce that PSI even more, except this one is adjustable. So in the case of this Redline Mini SFR, we're going to use a Allen key. We'll tighten it or loosen it, left or right, to make the dial go up or down. It's going to increase or decrease your PSI, and there's a direct relationship between your PSI and the muzzle velocity of that airsoft gun. Here we have an amped regulator. This one does not use an Allen key. It has this plastic cap, so it pops up, and then I just turn the cap left or right to do the same exact thing. This green knob, this is actually an open and close valve, so when it's lefty-loosey, screwed upward, it's actually closed, which means I can plug a tank into it, and it's not putting any pressure in the regulator until I lower this knob all the way down and let that pressure in. Three of the main discerning features between different regulators is going to be what's its refresh rate, which is kind of hard to measure. You kind of just have to compare them. What's the maximum PSI it'll let you adjust to? And then what's its form factor, and is it field lockable? So I guess it's 4. So let's start with the refresh rate. If I had this regulator and I said it's like 80 PSI, every time I shoot this replica, this dial is going to decrease and then increase again really quick. So it's going to be holding air at the pressure from the output into my gun. It's going to hold that air for my shot. And then when I use that air, because I shot the replica, it has to refresh that. So the quicker it could refresh, the more consistent you should expect your FPS to be shot to shot. If this had a very slow refresh rate, if I did a full auto burst, a really long one, you might see that your FPS is like dropping as you're shooting it, because this guy doesn't have a chance to keep up. A lot of regulators on the market right now have a usable refresh rate. I like the Mini SFR, I like the amped regulator, and I like the Polar Star regulators. Those are my favorites. That's what I use. I'm not telling you what to do. Then we have the max PSI it can go up to. Most of these are going to go up to 160 PSI, and that's about it. In a lot of cases, most of the HPA builds I do, they kind of sit comfortably at around 80 PSI. Anywhere between, like, the broad range I'm normally using is between like 70 PSI and like 120 PSI. Somewhere in between there. Depending on your replica, like the barrel length, the bore diameter, that might affect what FPS you get at a certain PSI. But I'll also say this now, don't get so fixated on what the number on the dial says. The dial is useful for you to have a general idea of where you're at. It really helps you diagnose if something's wrong with the gun. If you're cranked up all the way and your gun is still underpowered, then that can help you deduce that maybe there's something wrong with the gun itself. Again, the context is I'm handing you a brand new gun that I built you and you're plugging and playing. That shouldn't be a problem. So what I'm telling you is don't worry about the number on the dial. Don't get fixated on 80 PSI is 350 FPS. Don't do that, because temperature can affect what that output pressure is. In the summer when it's really hot, heat makes air expand, and you'll notice that like your PSI, not your PSI, but your FPS might actually go up as a result of the pressure increasing because that air expands in the tank as it gets hot. That air also expands in the regulator as it gets hot, and your line as it gets hot. But if I'm doing like a DMR and this gun is intended to shoot really hard, it's nice to have a regulator that can go up to 200 or 220 PSI. So if I'm doing like a DMR build, I'm going to recommend a regulator that's going to allow us to go up to that higher pressure. Next thing would be form factor. The Mini SFR is mini. It's in the name. It's nice, small, and compact. While the amped regulator is really nice, has some cool features on it. It can be a little bit bulky for some. So that's like part of what I consider when I'm looking at what regulator is best for an end user, but it's not the most important thing. Performance is key. The other thing is like compliance. You're going to go to a field, they're going to chrono you. You're going to adjust your PSI at chrono. Again, don't get fixated on the PSI number on the dial. Chrono it at the field or event that you're going to play at with the BBs that they're telling you to chrono with. Adjust your regulator so that you're compliant with that. After they chrono you, they're going to want to lock it because there might be like 30 HPA guys at the field that day. So they might have some way that they like to lock or tag regulators that they chronoed. That way they know who actually chronoed and who didn't chrono, or who ripped off their chrono tag and hurt little Timmy. For good reason. Don't hurt little Timmy. I talked about the key features that you'll see on like every bottle regulator. Let's look at the key features you'll see on every regulator. You're going to have this QD attachment. That's what you're going to plug your hose into. And then your hose has a QD point that'll plug into the integrated line coming out of your airsoft gun. Ooh. There's going to be a blowout valve. In the case of this amped regulator, I don't really see an explicit blowout valve here. It might be a blowout valve in the form of this screw. Maybe this is meant to shear if it's under too much pressure. But the Redline Mini SFR definitely has a blowout valve. And again, this is to prevent things from blowing up. You'll notice with the Redline Mini SFR, if you turn your regulator all the way up and then some, this blowout valve will go and it'll start letting all that excess air out. And it'll do that until you lower your PSI down. And then we're also going to have a dial. Now, the dial is going to tell us the PSI that we're putting into our airsoft gun. Now, again, don't get so fixated on the exact number equating to an exact FPS. They're numbers. Get compliant for the field that you're playing at through chrono. Only touch your PSI at chrono. That's the only way you're really going to know what your gun's actually doing. As far as tuning your FCU and settings like that, again, the context of this video is I built you an airsoft gun. That's HPA. It's your first time. I chose your tank and regulator and all that stuff. And when I'm range testing your gun after I built it, I had already asked you a bunch of questions about what BB weight you're going to run. Maybe I made suggestions. What fields you're playing at, and I set the settings to work best with the gun. Not based on what PSI you set it to, but based on what it's going to chrono with what weight BB. Now let's talk about dual source. All this dual source kit is a little adapter that will let me plug 2 tanks in simultaneously. This is the AMP dual source kit. Has the green knobs on them that we see on their regulator. It's an open and close valve. So if I was doing an LMG build, and I'm going to Milsom West, and I'm not going to be able to walk off to refill my tanks, and I'm willing to carry a bunch of tanks, and I want to have air, I might carry 2 of these really big guys, throw that in my pack. 90 cubic inch tank times 2 is 180 cubic inches. It's a lot of air. So you'll have both of them plugged in simultaneously. Tank A and imaginary tank B. And then when they're plugged in, you tighten the knobs so that you open them. And when they're both open, you're running both tanks at the same time. They're both going to drain at the same time. And then on the end of this dual source kit, you can screw in whatever regulator you want. Here we have a more up-to-date Redline Mini SFR. So just kind of following the path, we talked about the bottle regulator, started talking about the regulator, and this little accessory that'll go in between your tanks and your regulator if you wanted to run 2. Quick little talk on PSI, FPS, and air efficiency. So again, context, if I built the gun, you don't really have to worry about this stuff. I'm catering the build to your use case. But let's say we set it to run 4 O's, 0.40 gram BBs. And then you go to an event where they issue BBs, and they're only going to give you 2 8s. There's a big gap in weight between those different BB weights. If you're running 2 8s, but your gun is tuned to set for 4 O's, just understand that it might not shoot the best with 2 8s, at the FPS that you have the gun set to at chrono. That can kind of be fixed by messing with your settings, but if you're not comfortable messing with those FCU settings, I really suggest you look at the owner's manual for the engine that was installed into your replica and understand how it works, and feel free to contact the tech that built it. If it's me, or if it's not me, if it's somebody else, see if you can contact them and just try to get a quick pointer, and hopefully they give you some quick suggestions. I'm not going to go into the suggestions in this video because it is kind of case by case, and I'm just trying to keep it simple. Yeah, PSI, FPS, and air efficiency. Here's the chart. As you increase PSI, your FPS will go up and your air efficiency will decrease. The more pressure you're using, the more air you're using out of that tank every shot, which means you're going to run out of air quicker if you are shooting a lot of BBs and it's very high pressure. PSI and FPS, it's not one-to-one. If I have a 10-inch Mark 18 and at 80 PSI, it's shooting 350 FPS, but then I have a 20-inch M16, at 80 PSI, it's likely going to shoot a lot more than 350 FPS. Because the barrel length of your airsoft gun will affect air efficiency. The longer the barrel and the tighter the bore, the less your PSI has to be to achieve the same FPS if you had that FPS with a gun with a shorter and wider bore barrel. And the FCU settings 100% play a role in that, and I'm really trying not to get into the weeds of that. That's not the point of this video. Airsoft actually has a really great video on tuning your Polar Star FCU, and Tom goes through all of the settings on the Polar Star FCU, what they mean, how to tune it, and all that good stuff. Otherwise, like if I built your replica for you, I probably explained that stuff to you already. So if it's something that you care to deal with, go down that rabbit hole. If not, just stay with me. I saved this part for the end just because once we already talked about the tanks and regulators and all that stuff, it makes it easier to digest this next part. Therefore, I don't think it's very out of order. Let's talk about gas stocks really quick. It's not that complicated. Here's a AntTech KGS. This is my personal KGS I built for myself a long time ago. This is the gas stock. This gas stock is basically just a regulator. That's what it is. Now the difference between this regulator and this regulator is that this one is mounting directly to your airsoft gun. So because it has to fit on the airsoft gun and not be super bulky, it's going to be very minimalistic, whether if it's the Polar Star, UGS, or CGS, or if it's the Wolverine Wraith stock. So your gas stock regulator is not going to have a place for you to plug a line into. It's not going to have a dial that tells you what your PSI is. And it technically does have a form of a blowout valve, but I've never been able to get these to blow out. I think they're just made to not let you overpressure them. But this doesn't have a dial. How will I know what PSI I need to do to get that FPS? Again, stop thinking about the number on the dial. Always adjust your PSI at chrono so that your gun is chronoing what it needs to chrono with the weight BB that it needs to chrono with, so that you can play at that field or that event. Again, the context. If I built you your replica, I probably already know where you're going to be using this, and I've already looked at their chrono rules, and I've already set everything up so that it's compliant. You still have a responsibility to be able to adjust your regulator though. You might set it one weekend, and then the next weekend, even though the dial hasn't changed, your FPS might be different. So just understand how to adjust it. And all you really need to focus on is that you increase it or decrease it to increase or lower your FPS. This guy uses a tiny Allen key. This guy uses a bigger Allen key. And this guy uses a plastic knob, which is attached to basically an Allen key. And because the gas stock is fixed onto the gun, and we're not using a line, there's no line coming out of the gun. We don't have to plug the line in. Definitely removes a lot of the bulk. I like to use tiny 9CI tanks in it. The tank is just going to screw in, and then that's pretty much that. All right, guys, that was my attempt at very briefly going over the basics of how to use your HPA setup. It's not in depth. It's not super crazy. user maintenance. It's not where to go get your tanks hydro tested. It's not that. This is not the end of you learning about your HPA setup. This is the bare minimum so that, again, the context, if you had me build you an HPA replica, you got your brand new built replica, brand new tank and regulator. This is the simple walkthrough on what it is you're dealing with and the rough explanation of how it works and how to use it. There is no better time than this video to get in the comments and type away and tell me everything that I left out in this basic introductory little topic. Just continue the discussion. Any newbie HPA user that's getting into this that might stumble across this video, I hope the information I laid out will be useful for them. And I also hope that the discussions in the comments will be useful for them too, because again, this is not the end all be all for this info. Understand how to use this equipment. Understand how to tune your HPA engines. Understand how your regulators work, how your tanks work. Understand how to maintain them. It's just going to ensure that you have the best experience using it at the end of the day. So with all that said, guys, that's all I got. Like, comment, subscribe, do all that good stuff. And I'll see you on the next one. Good night. God bless. I'm out.